Hi everyone, welcome to today's session, Relevance and Brand Storytelling in the Post-COVID Era. I'm just going to hold back a minute or two just to let a few more people come in. Good afternoon, everyone. If you're just joining us, I can see more people are coming in now. Hope you are doing well today. You've got a brew ready for the session that'll be starting very shortly. Okay, let's make a start. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining today's session. I'm Sean Gibb. I'm the Events and Marketing Manager here at Pro Manchester. And I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, Relevance and Brand Storytelling in the Post-COVID Era, hosted by Big Partnership. I'm particularly excited because this is the first in a new series of webinars, Big Lunchtime Conversations, that will give participants access to marketing industry experts for bite-sized discussions around some of the key trends and opportunities available in a post-COVID world. So there'll be more details coming out shortly of the next upcoming Big Lunchtime Conversations, so stay on the lookout for those on the website. Following today's session, I'll send out a post-event email which will contain any post-event collateral, links to where you can find out about other Pro Manchester events, and our Pro Manchester YouTube channel where you can view some of the past webinars you may have missed or take a second look. Hit the subscribe button while you're in there to stay up to date. This email will also contain a feedback form. If you could please fill this in, it really is helpful to continue to improve our offerings and provide consistently great content. It's also a great place for you to suggest ideas of what you'd like to see in some future webinars, so please do. Just a couple of signpostings. Please be aware that the webinar is being recorded, and please use the chat function to ask any questions, make any comments, observations, and we'll try our best to answer as many of those as possible. The chat function can be found predominantly in the top right hand corner, and it's sort of two boxes overlapping each other with a question mark. So yeah, get your questions into me on there. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Paul and Steph.
Hello.
Hiya. So hopefully you can all see the screen we are showing at the moment. So I'm Paul, Senior Creative Strategist at Big. I actually only joined the company at the start of lockdown. So even though Steph and I have been working together for about 6 months now, we've never actually met, which is obviously very interesting. Prior to being at Big, I worked at different places. Most recently, I was the creative director at Havas. I've worked with brands like AO.com, Asda, Brewdog, Greggs, Kellogg's, lots of big names. So hopefully we can share a few experience today and have a bit of a chat about something that's quite interesting to us. Steph?
Hi, I'm Steph Clark. I head up the Edinburgh office of Big. I don't know if you can still see, you probably can't, but I'm sitting sort of in front of Edinburgh Castle. You couldn't get more Scottish branded than that. And I've been with Big for about 2 years now. I joined from EDF Energy. Current clients and past clients kind of include both in the corporate and consumer side. Apple, Brew have worked with, Deloitte, Magners, White & Mackay, quite a lot of Scottish brands, and more than I can mention, but I'll come on to some more of those later on in the presentation.
Oh, so look, there's loads of these kind of webinars going around right now, especially if you work in marketing and PR, and we kind of just sat down and thought, let's do something that's maybe a bit different, but also something that's kind of coming to us from clients at the moment, and is kind of, as the title of the webinar suggests, is really relevant. Probably before COVID, but especially now, and kind of in the general consumer mindset. So we've kind of taken something and given it a bit of a banner, if you like. So we've got this idea around how lip service marketing is essentially, it's kind of creeping into some of the things that ourselves and clients and some of the people on this call are probably working in. What does it mean? I guess it's kind of what we're talking about is tokenistic gestures that feel like a good idea as part of a campaign, but actually when you sort of strip them back, are they really relevant? So we're going to talk about that today. So first of all, I think it's important to kind of look at typically how you can end up in this kind of trap or situation of lip service marketing. I think it's important to say that it's not always a conscious choice or decision, and that's kind of why it's probably a trap to be really wary of. We've kind of got, I would say there's two main reasons why people, brands, marketing teams, agencies fall into this kind of like trap or a slippery slope towards tokenism and lip service marketing. The first one's behaving like sheep. So it's when you see someone else doing something that has relative success that you think sounds interesting, or that perhaps you're missing out, and you kind of default to thinking we must copy that. And often, you know, it comes about that the brand that's done it or has done a good job on it, they've kind of got a right to talk about it or be associated with it. And actually, the ones that kind of act like sheep, if you like, are the ones who kind of end up being on the bandwagon and kind of making a bit of a mess of it. So the second trap, if you like, is basically when you're not sure about something but you end up doing it anyway. And I think the lady's face in the picture there is probably mine when a client comes to us and says, we want to do this, and you kind of thinking to yourself, yikes, really, why? And I guess for this one, this is a bit more of a complicated trap why people fall into it. Sometimes it can be laziness. You just do something because you think it's the right thing to do without really checking. Sometimes it's down to time, isn't it? We've all been there when you kind of think we haven't got anything, let's go with something we're not sure about. And then I guess the last one is you just do it on a hunch, or somebody usually not in the marketing department thinks it's a good idea, and because they're perhaps more senior, you're afraid to sort of challenge back, and you end up doing it anyway, and kind of, as it says on the screen there, hope for the best. So I guess those are the two main reasons why people fall into a trap. So what are we actually talking about? What do we mean? How does this concept of lip service marketing manifest itself, if you like? And kind of, I guess, thinking about some of the things we've seen recently, some of the things that perhaps clients have come to us with, or you know, just kind of being aware of stuff that, you know, we see ourselves or we're exposed to. We've identified some patterns of how sort of tokenistic gestures are creeping into things and how they're manifesting themselves. I think on a personal level, there's some of them that are starting to annoy me, if you like. I think they're a bit lazy, and I'm just kind of made some examples here to kind of show you a bit more about what we're talking about. So the first one is something I call Manquashing. And is it just me, or does everyone kind of seem to slap a B or use a Tony Wilson quote and something and think, job done, that makes us sound Mancunian or appeals to people in Manchester? I think one of the most common tokenistic gestures is misusing localisms, and I do think, kind of being from around here and kind of seeing stuff, I think we're seeing people fall into the trap of doing this. I mean, how many times have you seen those stripes on a marketing campaign, and you're not really sure why, or you know, you see someone say our kid and they think it makes them fit in with local people, and not quite often it maybe doesn't. It feels quite unnatural, or you just kind of wonder why. Again, it's I suppose it's my opinion, but I've just kind of we just picked out some examples as well as what does that kind of look like and why is it bad. Bit of a disclaimer. We were going to use some real examples here, but we kind of changed our mind at the last minute just because we didn't want to throw them under the bus. But I think the fact that these are quite generic and they probably feel like something you might have seen similar elsewhere probably tells you everything you need to know. The fact they are quite tokenistic. You know, I won't read through all the examples there, but you can kind of see where we're coming at. The one in the middle probably feels quite relevant. for anyone who's been watching that BBC programme quite recently, it was on last night on BBC Two, where, you know, I'm not saying those guys do it, but you know, how many times have you seen someone opening a new luxury apartment and naming it after something local for no apparent reason, but they're doing something else that's kind of upsetting people, or they've got no right to talk about it. That last one as well, I can't believe how many times I've seen that Ian Baran quote used, and you just kind of think, why? You know, I've just put an example there about Manchester's got everything but a beach. It's got no affordable housing as well, so don't put that on your brochure. You know, just a few examples there. Steph?
Yeah, and the same applies to Scotland, you know, where brands automatically think, yeah, Scotland, you know, we'll add a Scottish accent or a bit of tartan, and, you know, we clearly as a brand understand Scotland, which is just not the case. You know, they've got no reason for it. We call it tartanisation, you know, and the definition for that is really quite derogatory. You know, it's this sort of excessive use of tartan or, you know, Scottish imagery all over the place, and it kind of gives a really distorted, sentimental view of Scotland if you think like Brigadoon. And it's a shame actually, because, you know, really good brands like shortbread brands and, you know, tartan itself have become associated with like a term of derision because of its misuse badly by brands. Other misused terms are things like made in Scotland, you know, when it's clearly not, adding mick to something, unless, you know, obviously your burger, and you know, putting a thistle at the end of it. But you know, clearly all these things are not relevant unless you have some, you know, real authenticity and link to Scotland. And in terms of, you know, rainbow washing, we've called it there, but pride, we've all seen this, you know, sort of bandwagon jumping when there isn't any real thought or reason behind it. You know, people just, or brands trying to make a quick buck about it, but with no real, you know, as to why they're doing it. We don't know why they're doing it, and they probably don't know either. So these really sort of are to identify, I suppose, what the common reactions are. You know, lip service is a marketing term that we've kind of made up. Maybe, I don't know, was it there before? It might have been there before. Paul said he made it up. I don't think that's right. But I think it's a good catch-all phrase to describe tokenistic marketing. You know, we're in a world where consumers not only expect transparency, but, you know, they actively seek it out now. It's all about brand value. And these emojis kind of represent those. The first one being, you know, whatever, not again, that kind of puzzled face. The second one being, you know, why are you doing it? And that's really essential, I think, to what we're talking about, is for brands, and we would advise them, is why are you doing this? It all comes back to that. And the angry face is obviously when things get even worse. It's that backlash that you typically see and can cause real corporate reputational issues. And it seems to manifest itself typically on a kind of local and regional level, on this kind of bandwagon jumping. And that's not to say that brands don't get it right. But again, it's kind of getting back to that consumer authenticity. You need to be really sure that there's a reason for doing it, and brands kind of risk missing the point there when they make assumptions rather than paying attention to what their consumers want. And that's all about insight and data. So, you know, at best, it's probably well-intentioned laziness. At worst, it could be received as a bit patronising and a turn-off. And it can even be offensive, you know, as that last emoji says, and it's a red flag because you're trying to use something that has no relevance to you whatsoever or your audience. Next slide. So Brew, this is a brand that I have worked on in the past, and here's an example really of a brand that gets absolutely right. You know, it's a brand, you know, it's part of their DNA. You can see exactly why they do their marketing campaigns. You know, it's commonly known as Scotland's other national drink. And, you know, who here probably wouldn't look at any advertising campaign or the Brew ads and would say that doesn't feel right for that brand. You know, controversial as they are, they always kind of feel right for that brand. You know, from Phenomenal to Fanny, you know, the hugely successful marketing campaigns across quite a lot of demographics. And because of those hugely successful marketing campaigns, and they've done, you know, the right reason behind it, that's become part of Scotland's national identity. And it's totally relevant, and it's definitely allowed to have tartan on it. Next slide. So this is the kind of other end of the spectrum. This is a brand I work with at the moment called Johnsons of Elgin. And for those that don't know or haven't heard about Johnsons of Elgin, they are a luxury cashmere manufacturer based in Scotland. One of Scotland's oldest family-run businesses, huge international market in terms of China and the US. who are all hungry for that kind of Scottish authenticity, real provenance, you know, made in Scotland. And you can see made in Scotland on quite a lot of their stuff, and they absolutely have the right to use that. And what's really important here is the ethical credentials. So circularity is something that we're talking about a lot. And although it's a fairly new term, it's probably commonly known as circular economy. So that's really about sustainability, you know, focused on eliminating waste and the continual use of resources. Think Stella McCartney and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. But you'll see ethical retail used a lot in fashion. And it's that kind of battle between slow luxury, which is sort of Loewe, the Spanish brand, or Johnson's Velgen, versus Primark. And there's been a lot of that over the pandemic period. It's bandied about constantly. So it's maybe a new term, but it's been part of Johnson's DNA for like 200 years. They've been a circular economy for 200 years. So they've absolutely, you know, nailed they've got a reason to be using this.
So obviously, you know, we've identified an issue there and talked about some patterns and things like that. So you're probably thinking, all right, then, well, how do we tackle it? And it's not always a conscious decision, and that, you know, it's kind of a trap that we fall into. What's the thing that we can do that kind of helps us to avoid that? So at Big, we've got this little test, and we kind of, you know, we work with clients, and essentially the kind of thinking behind it is act like a kid. And ask why, and ask why, and ask why, and ask why again, and do it lots and lots. So what does that look like? I've just put a version of our sense check kind of bullet points, if you like, on there. So if there's one page in this whole webinar that's interesting that you want to do a screenshot of, I'd say it's this one. So do it now. And it's kind of about thinking about the power of asking why. And ultimately, I suppose, is if you can't stand up what you're thinking of doing or what you're planning to do after you've asked these questions, then don't do it. So if you're not sure, ask people, look at insights, research it, and if you still can't do it, still can't stand it up, don't do it. I think the here and now point is quite an interesting one, that kind of last one, and that's really around relevance, and it's about the number of times you see something where people think, oh, it was relevant 2 years ago, it was relevant 6 months ago, and actually maybe it isn't now, and you know, you're going on a hunch and you haven't kind of tested it. And I think post COVID especially, everything's changed, and we keep hearing all these terms bandied around about new normal, and people have got a different outlooks. I think kind of now more than ever, that last point about, you know, sense checking stuff that you're doing, whether it's localism or it's bandwagon jumping or whatever it is, I think that's really important. I think if I was going to give a tip as well, is when you work in marketing, or if you work in a particular company, you can put on marketing tinted glasses. And you can sometimes think something's a good idea, and you may be a bit blinkered to it. So kind of my tip, if you like, or kind of one of the things I seem to do is I ask my mum or I ask my mates and say, what do you think of this? And that's a really good barometer, if you like, or a way to kind of find out things, whether people will care, if it sounds genuine, or if, you know, you're potentially exposing yourself to being looking hypocritical or tone deaf, whatever it is. I guess it's kind of a bit of a test, and that, you know, that can manifest itself in lots of different ways. It might be focus groups, it might be full-on research, you know what it is, or like I said, it could be something free where you ask your friend who doesn't work in marketing. So this is the world's longest ever slide title, but what we wanted to do is just show you a real example of something we've worked on I've worked on in recent times, where we originally had something that was potentially going to be tokenism, and how we kind of used this test of asking why and looking for the relevance, and actually used it to come up with a completely different campaign, if you like. Another quick disclaimer from me is that I've kind of left out some of the detail and kind of the name of the brand from this, but you can probably work out who it is. It's definitely one of my favorite other ideas or campaigns that I've worked on in recent times. So I thought I'd just give you a bit of a behind the scenes look about how it kind of came about, if you like. So quickly, the brief was a online retailer came to us and said they wanted to do something to create a talking point around launching a new mobile phone brand. So someone, you know, a competitor to someone like Carphone Warehouse, if you like. And the client, absolutely brilliant, came to us and initially said they wanted to do something perhaps with a red telephone box. And I suppose on the face of it, if you think about it, telephone box, phones, it kind of fits. And then kind of because the brand was based in Manchester and everyone else seemed to be doing things with bees at the time, they had the idea of, or the idea was floated around doing a bee branded telephone box and dropping it somewhere in spinning fields. And I guess on the face of it, you kind of go, yeah, all right, that might be interesting. It might get people talking. But when you put it through that kind of the why test, if you like, it just didn't make sense. Another idea that was floated was to change the colour of a telephone box to that kind of green there that's on the screen. Again, because that's the colour of the brand and they wanted people to know they were now working with phones. But again, I think when we sort of tested it, or we did a bit of a focus group and had to think about it, you kind of realise that actually there's not really any relevance between phone boxes and mobile phones, other than that they've sort of disappeared because everyone's got a phone. And actually when you speak to certainly kind of like younger audience groups, you realise that a lot of them don't even know what one of those red things is. So we kind of killed that one, and kind of looking at kind of what we did, and again going back to that question of asking why, is that we took it right back to what it was, and the purpose of what the kind of this new mobile phone brand wanted to stand for was that they wanted to make mobile phone contracts less annoying for people. So what we did was we kind of had a look at the kind of way in which people use mobile phones and all the things that they do, and we looked at what else we could do to make mobile phones less annoying, but something that lots of people could relate to. So you can see them people there, they're walking down the street, they're looking at their phone, they're probably going to bump into each other, or perhaps someone's going to trip over that dog. And the idea that we got to was this thing, we launched a mobile phone lane in spinning fields. And the idea was that it was to help make mobile phone use less annoying for people, but actually it tapped into kind of something that lots of people were familiar with, and something that they could identify with. And what we sort of did, it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, and we kind of positioned it as a trial of a mobile phone lane and said this could be a vision of the future to help make mobile phone users less annoying, kind of drawing back to that kind of the brand message, if you like. We got some really good research as well to kind of stand it up. So I think it was like 2/3 of Brits said they were guilty of it or they knew about it. And this little installation in spinning fields, it created lots of headlines. Hopefully some of you might have seen it. And I guess it created fame, which was the ultimate kind of purpose there. I think the key things to kind of sign that one off, if you like, is you look at it. There's not a Manchester Bee or an Ian Brown quote in sight, but actually it did really well and people got it, and we removed the tokenism and came up with something really good by sort of challenging back, if you like.
This is a slightly kind of different example, but we thought was a good example to take you through, and is a current client at the moment. So if you go to the next slide, yeah. So you'll all know who this is, Alan Titchmarsh, the face of gardening, the David Attenborough of gardening, as we call him. But you probably haven't heard of HTA, which is the Horticultural Trades Association. And even then, it gets slightly more convoluted because they represent the ornamental horticulture industry in the UK. So there was a kind of a real challenge here. They came to us at the start of the pandemic. Basically, they represent all the UK growers growing plants across the UK, so a huge sort of backbone industry. And the challenge was that nobody's ever really heard of them. So how did we make this sector relevant that probably most people hadn't heard of? And most people probably go to the garden centres and don't know where their flowers come from. Are they from Britain? Or are they from, internationally, from abroad? So how did we make this group of people relevant during the pandemic? And it was right at the start. So it came down to, we didn't put a British flag flying on it, but it did come down to buying British. So much of the work that we did was, buy British, save our UK growers, keep Britain blooming. Everything that kind of had keep Britain or British or UK. So really tying into that nationalistic authenticity, really, at the end of the day. And Alan helped us spearhead that. It made gardening relevant again, but not only to existing gardeners, but to new gardeners. And we've got quite a lot of evidence now to prove that there are millions of new gardeners on the back of it, a younger audience. So when we say younger, you know, that's probably under 45, which is not that young, but given gardeners are usually probably knocking on 75, then that's good. So this was really about saving part of our British identity and culture, but we had to make it simple for people, and that was get garden centres open, get behind it. Much of the work was actually done politically, but our approach was to take it to the consumers, and we did a lot of data insight around how they felt about plants. You know, were they gardening already? There was a lot of stuff about confidence around garden centres and how confident they were getting into them. So it was all based on data and insight and really tapping into that audience. And as a result, we got garden centres open within the first tranche of reopening. So it managed to save a hugely important industry for the UK.
So, you know what, we've given you we promised 30 minutes over your lunch, so we've done that. So we've just done a little slide at the end here with some kind of takeaways, if you like, to maybe summarise some of the things we've talked about. Maybe some of them you don't agree with, I don't know, but we like to start a debate, I guess. So quick takeaways from me are always ask why. You know, we've said it why, and I guess, you know, it kind of, some of the examples there we've given are really good in kind of showing the power of asking why, if you like. I think one of the big things, and I would say I've only started doing this perhaps in maybe the last few years, is speaking up before something happens and actually not being afraid to challenge something back. I think I can think of so many occasions where you think that's not a good idea and it goes down the path and it comes out and you see someone else do something, you think that was a bad idea, why didn't anyone say something? And quite often people agree and they just haven't spoken up. So I'd encourage people to speak up. And obviously we gave that mobile phone lane example there, and as an example of how you can often spark something better by doing that. I think to kind of Steph's point and some of the other examples as well, understanding the brand that you're working for, you're representing as an agency or in-house, and how its audience perceive it is really key. If your audience isn't going to like it, or it doesn't talk to them, why are you doing it? And then I guess the final point is if it feels tokenistic, it probably is.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Paul, in that, you know, and probably given my mighty age, you learn with experience, but ultimately that gut reaction, if something isn't right, is a real flag, I think, and don't be afraid to speak up. And it's quite difficult sometimes, but ultimately brands will always thank you for it afterwards.
And look, you know, we're happy to take any questions anyone's got.
If you have any questions, please submit them to the chat function now. We've had a few comments during the session, Paul and Steph, just really good messages of positivity and some of the ideas that they've really enjoyed, so thank you. Yeah, and a few thank yous, but yeah, no questions so far. I'll just keep the lines open for another minute. Okay, so if there's no further questions, I will close the call now. All that remains to be said is thank you so much to Big Partnership. Thank you so much to Paul Hadfield and to Stephanie Clark. And thank you to all of you for joining us this afternoon, and look forward to seeing you at the next Big Partnership lunch. Okay, see you next time. Bye.